All right, it is 10 o'clock. We're going to get started here. So first off, I want to thank everybody for coming out here. My name is Scott Baret. You may have seen my Pittsburgh Classic Mac Lab that's set up. It's right against the right-hand wall when you're facing concessions over there. And we're going to talk a bit about what we do, and we're especially going to talk about how we continue to use these older Macintosh computers, all of which are at least 33 years old, how we use them even in today's educational setting. A little background. By trade, I'm an educator. For the last 14 years, I have run an educational services business in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, called simply Scott Baret Educational Services. And we basically fill in the gaps where a lot of classrooms can't or maybe won't be able to do so. We work alongside students who are in the schools. We work with students who maybe need something a little different. And we certainly do a little bit of everything. We do multiple subjects, multiple grade levels, all the way up through college. But one constant here, not only within the context of my business, but pretty much everywhere, is that we still use these amazing tools. So question for all of you out there, if you had a really good power tool that worked really well for you, would you bother to replace it if nothing was wrong with it? I don't think so. That's exactly why we continue to use these computers. So why Classic Macs? Well, simply put, they're the best tool out there. And we're going to explore why they're the best tool. It's not just some subjective deal where it's like, oh, you grew up using Classic Macs. That's true. I started kindergarten in the fall of '92 when these computers would have been current, and a lot of people were still developing software for them, and Apple was still making parts for them and everything else. But it comes without saying that it's also a question of what has come since then and also what was around before. So we're going to do a little timeline here, and we're actually going to go a little bit out of order on this timeline to narrow it down to why we use the computers we do. Of course, I'm going to start at the beginning with some early educational computing. So think about things like the teletype machine. Company like MEC, you know them better for Oregon Trail, number munchers, maybe Amazon Trail. But MEC started out with mainframe computers networked throughout the state of Minnesota. And if you wanted to play Oregon Trail back then, you could connect to these computers. But there was no screen, just a keyboard. It was like a big typewriter. And you could only be told, you have reached Chimney Rock. You have died of dysentery. And if you wanted to hunt, you could be told there's a deer on the screen. You had to type bang as quickly as you could, and it would say good eating tonight if you bagged your deer. So obviously quite limited, but still very much pioneering, more ways than one with Oregon Trail. Eventually, of course, we had the Apple II, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of respect out here for the Apple II. It was a pioneer. It evolved a little bit over the years, became a little more capable. But even then, remember the original Apple II couldn't even handle lowercase letters. So it's still kind of a limited platform in a sense, but yet the educational software was developing. Of course, we had MS-DOS, which, yeah, we can do some amazing things on DOS, and I'm sure there's some DOS guys out there. I know I've dabbled in DOS myself. But if you look at DOS, it too is somewhat limited, whether it be CGA graphics, whether it be 640K of RAM, whatever it is, your limitations are there. There's also the fact that from an educational standpoint, you have some limitations. If you're dealing with a 143K 5¼ inch floppy disk, even if you flip it over and you put side 2 in, or you have a second disk, you're not going to have the capability to really make this reach all students properly. Reason being, there's just not enough in that program that it can truly differentiate from student to student. And some programs did try this better than others. Sticky Bear Math was a good example, if anyone remembers that one. But most of these programs were pretty simple. They were just lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, where it's basically, do we know this fact? Do we know that 2 + 2 is 4? And if somebody puts in that it's 5, why is it wrong? Well, it's not going to tell you why it's wrong. It's just going to tell you, unless you live in Orwell's world, this thing's wrong. Go try it again. So again, pioneering, somewhat fun, but not quite ready to be in prime time yet as a really, truly good look at all sides of the coin, all 6 sides of the cube, if you will, from an educational standpoint. Let's fast forward to today. Now, you might be thinking, but wait a sec, don't we have like every capability in the world to make something decent today educationally? The answer to that is yes, but the problem is people are so profit-driven that they're just out there to make a buck or just do something and it's like, oh, well, this is what a principal might like or whatever, and this is what a superintendent might like. They're not really concerned about how the student learns. And frankly, a lot of these guys aren't even educators that are out there making this. They're just programmers looking for a job and their company's looking for some money. So here's the problem. We can look at current educational software under a few categories, and I'll start with bland, uninspiring textbook alternatives. If you're under the age of 30, you may have had the horrible, painful experience that is Study Island in your educational journey. If you're an educator and you have to teach with this monstrosity of a program, then you already know it's nothing better than a practice workbook. Now, schools love this because it's basically, oh, we can prep for our standardized test, and we can make sure that we have all the numbers in the spreadsheet in the right column and everything with all the students. Yeah, but there's a problem with that. Students see this as what they do on computers, and they hate it. And as a result, students start hating using computers. And that's a shame because I think all of us here today as computer guys, we know, hey, we can have a lot of fun with these things if we really want to. And I think anybody that's been over there to the hall or even just what you do in your everyday life, you know that you can even make something like Excel fun if you want to. But if kids are just seeing an electronic version of stuff that nobody's liked over all the decades it's been out, guess what? They're not going to like this, and they're going to hate the platform it's on, just like they hate pencils and they hate paper. The other problem is there's ads everywhere in some of these programs. Now, some of these could be quite good with educational programs, but for all we know, they're going to click on something, and it's going to have them spend the school district's money at some weird casino that somehow is going and funding some foreign adversary of ours. I mean, admit it, we've all seen that. We see a lot of the scams. It's even worse for the kids, though. They see that brightly colored double cherry for the casino thing or the number 7. They're like, oh, number 7, maybe it's 3 + 4 here. And as it turns out, they're just sending everything off overseas somewhere to who knows where. And the other problem with this is even if something's good, who's mining this data anyhow? How do we know it's not going to some great googly moogly in the sky or in the cloud, I guess we should say? And what are they doing with it? Why do they want our kids' data? What do they want with this? There are laws about this, but let's just say some companies are really good about trying to get around those. They basically think they're holier than thou and that these laws don't apply to them, even though this is our children. We want to keep them safe. We want to keep their data safe, their academic records, their differentiation records, no matter what it is. So we don't really want this to happen, but schools use it anyway. Why? It's free or cheap. And let's face it, when it comes to free and cheap, schools are just like my hometown Pittsburgh Pirates. They hate opening up their wallet. And trust me, I graduated from a school where I saw some of this with, oh, let's buy a little bit lesser model of computer. And it was a good decision on paper, but then I worked with the school IT department in high school. We had to replace hard drives left and right, and monitors were going, and we see what happens. They did, however, get a wonderful new IT director when I was a senior who started buying great machines, and we started to see some results. Problem is, a lot of the software has never exactly caught up to where we need it to be. And part of that is because there's a third category I have. So there's bland textbook alternatives, there's questionable online stuff, and then there's what I call orange drink software. So orange drink, a lot of you probably enjoy drinking it, consuming it, but let's face it, at best, it's maybe 3% juice and 97% high fructose corn syrup. That's what something like cool math games might be. You might see 4 plus 8 every now and then, but the rest of it is just playing what's essentially an iOS level game. And the kids like it because it's not math, it's not reading, it's not writing, it's not geography drills. It's just fun and games. But what are we deriving from it? Mindless entertainment. If you wanted that, go bring your Nintendo Switch to school. It'll serve the purpose just as well, if not better, because the games are actually well made for it. This is a sad state of affairs that we're in. This is something that easily could have been a whole lot better. But unfortunately, nobody is out there actively doing it. So how do we get to this point anyway? Well, for that, we have to look at what was the downfall of educational computing. So we're going to go one notch before. Notice we still haven't filled in our second hash mark here. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But that's where we look at what happened in the mid-1990s. CD-ROM became widespread. It held a lot, it was cheaper than a floppy disk, and everybody went all in with CD-ROM. This, unfortunately, was kind of what took everything down. When you had a new technology, you wanted to maximize it. And therefore, that's when we started to see the transition from Tropicana Pure Premium to High C. We started to see competition with video games, even incorporation with them. And we should have known from the disaster that was Mario is Missing that we can't combine Nintendo and learning, if you will. And it's unfortunate because we got games that tried too hard. We had math games that now had intricate storylines, and you have to follow them. And there's a big movie that's like 5 minutes long that plays because we want to flex our multimedia muscles here. Honestly, multimedia to me was always the dumbest word ever. And I don't think anybody around back then ever could truly put a good dictionary definition on it. Because let's face it, it already was sight and sound and interaction with anything. So what happened? This horrible term, multimedia. Everybody was using it. It's like, let's just put multimedia on it. It sounds great. It's a buzzword, whatever. So it continued its ascent, and we saw great franchises fall. Why do we need annoying background music in a Munchers game? I mean, some of it was pretty good. Oregon Trail 2 was a fantastic CD-ROM. It took the original concept and added in more landmarks. It added in the California Trail, the Mormon migration, the Donner Party Blizzard, more years of travel, better trade, more supplies, more decisions. And it even incorporated some real historical figures. So you could go and meet Marcus Whitman, and you could meet Jim Bridger, and you could meet a few other folks on the trail. Even Peg Leg Smith was on the trail. But then the internet became widespread, and suddenly it's like, oh, well, we have to get everybody online. This is the 21st century. We survived Y2K. Let's make the most of it now. And unfortunately, we also had a lot of companies that lost their soul. When you see companies absorbed into companies that don't even deal with software, like, remind me again, why does Mattel at one point own software companies? Mattel makes Hot Wheels cars. Mattel makes Barbie dolls. They need to stick to the story of Barbie and Ken without messing up our educational stuff. They're a toy maker. They're not a software developer. And unfortunately, they're being run as an old business that for years has sold playthings to children all over the world. They're not a software company. And when the C-suite changes hands, it's not going to be so good for what happens underneath. The properties just became stale. If you ask anybody to finish Where in the World Is, some of you may have even sung that if you're of a certain age, anybody under the age of 30 might not know that Carmen Sandiego comes next. The property just kind of died out, and not just because PBS canceled the show and Rockapella went off and did their own thing. And yes, that show did get me into a cappella music, and I think probably a lot of other people who watched that as well. So now we have our last blank, the sweet spot. So if the Apple II couldn't do enough, despite its great effort to do so. And CD-ROM is what killed everything and then led us into orange drink software and spyware software and everything else. We had a sweet spot in between. Because if we figure, if there's a fall, there's got to be a rise here as well. And that's where we've hit that sweet spot, which to me was in around the years 1988 to 1992. We're not really on floppy disk. Well, we still are, but we're on hard drives now with installation, even though we could run some from floppies. But we certainly aren't really at CD-ROM. And we're at a point now where we have much more to work with in terms of RAM, storage, graphics, sound, and oh yeah, experience with doing this before. But still a desire to really make the future amazing with education. That's what these early pioneers were out to do with educational computing. This was a place that nobody had been before. And if you figure with schools, they were always a little bit behind anyhow. Maybe you noticed that in some of the books that you've had. I mean, we still have kids today who get algebra problems about buying music on CD. 10 years ago, we had people who had to translate the word cassette tape in their foreign language classes. So the schools are always a little bit behind. Even some of the books we read, I mean, whether it be Dick and Jane, nobody operates like Dick and Jane. Even today, kids think Ramona Quimby and Fudge are a little bit out of date because, you know, there's no smartphones in those books. But with educational computing, it gave us an excuse to modernize around best practices. And thankfully, even though things change, the delivery changes, the methodology sometimes changes, and it sometimes comes full circle. I mean, how many times have we gone from whole language to phonics and then back to a mix of that? How many times have we seen math changed around? We had modern math in the 60s. We had the manipulatives that everybody was using. We had the investigations method about 15 years ago that was super popular. The Singapore math fad seems to be dying out a little bit. And now it's like, okay, we aren't doing a ton of drill, but mark my words, probably in 10 minutes, everyone will be giving the mad minute again. At the end of the day, though, if you look at what your nth grader needs to know, that part really hasn't changed a whole lot. Now, we've brought some concepts down to lower levels. What was second grade 30 years ago is now basically first grade. But knowing how to read and write and communicate, how to do math, how to problem solve, how to reason scientifically, that really hasn't changed. So why change up something that works? Again, back to my initial question, if you have a good tool, why get rid of it? That's exactly what we have in these computers. So get the balance right. You want something that's educational enough on one hand that you're going to learn from it. And you're going to take that knowledge with you and retain it and also pick up some skills like reasoning along the way. But you also want an element of fun. Now, you don't want this to be too much of a game or else it plays too much like a video game and you lose all your kids that get too frustrated with the game part. You want the gameplay to be simple enough for non-gamers, but fun enough for gamers. And by that, I mean casual gamers up to the people that are glued to their PlayStation when they get home. And then on the other hand, you also want to make sure you have an authentic learning experience, not just memorization of a fact. Why does that fact work? How can we look at it in a different light? We also want something that's differentiatable. If you have a classroom of 25 first graders, you have 25 different brains. They're all going to learn differently. They're all going to come in at different levels. They're all going to exit at different levels. No matter how well you teach something, some of them are going to make quantum leaps. Some of them are going to make enough steps that they're going to get to the next level. And that's true of any grade level. That's true of any subject. There's also the fact that we love exploratory learning. How many of you preferred lab day in a science class to reading out of the textbook or listening to your teacher blab on about why a chemical reaction should work this way with just an equation? How many of you liked physics class because you could go and play around with something? Or how about when you were in elementary school in math class, and rather than do a worksheet, you got the counting cubes, or you got the pattern blocks, and you got to play with that. Exploratory learning is where it's at. And that's something that you can do more of on the computer, especially because the computer doesn't bring out the evil red pen of doom to write a big fat F on the top of the paper if you miss something. The computer's forgiving. It gives us more chances. It stays with us. There was a song in our third grade music book called My Computer and Me. And this is back when computers were kind of new. And it basically said a lot of that. Those were the lyrics to it. And it also said it doesn't get mad or jealous like someone that I know. I remember that verse line by line, word by word. Because let's face it, even teachers can run out of patience sometimes with some students. Maybe we've been the victim of that sometimes. But the computer, on the other hand, you're going to just keep swimming. There's also that fascination. When we see people come into our lab, our Classic Mac Lab, they're fascinated by the programs, the sights, the sounds, everything else. Even the printers. People are printing off banners or Kid Pix drawings, and it's kind of like kids watching cookies bake in front of the oven. It's the most boring process. 10 minutes of just sitting there watching dough go from a ball into a cookie. But to a kid, it's absolutely fascinating because they love to watch the process. They love to see what makes this go. Not to mention the fact these programs hit that balance. So that fascination is there, that wonder is there. It's kind of like when you give a kid a new box of crayons. What kind of possibility do we have with them? What kind of bright colors will we find in that Crayola 64 box? How does that sharpener work on the back? You know, we think about that. Hey, what about this one? It says this color is going to be retired soon. Let's see what it's all about. Why do people not like this color? What about this new one right here? What's with this new shade of blue anyhow? There's that same level of fascination with the computers. Every bit as much now as over 30 years ago when these were a novel thing. So let's talk about why the Mac hits the sweet spot. And I'm going to go through a few programs that we use. First up, this was the original version of Oregon Trail on the Apple II. Some of you may be thinking, well, this doesn't look right. Now, this was back in the 70s. This was the first iteration of it. And this is what I mean by the fact that we had some definite problems with those early computers. They were great. They were amazing for their time. They were getting into schools thanks to Bell and Howell with their partnership with Apple. But this is about the extent of what you had. And for a kid back then, yeah, it's fascinating, but it just doesn't do enough. There were efforts to upgrade things. I think this is the version of Oregon Trail many of us are familiar with if we're an Apple II user, or we started on that. But even here, you have your limitations. For example, there's only 3 occupations. You can be a banker, a carpenter, or a farmer. But it was a start. Then there's the Mac version. These are the graphics from the 1991 edition. Suddenly, there's more occupations. There's the ability to trade. There's the ability to go to these stores and see why you don't want to be too far out looking for convenience at the general stores that aren't Matt's General Store in Independence, Missouri. It's easier to hunt. We see what happens if an area is overhunted. We learn commerce. We learn geography. We learn history. We learn conservation. And in the network version, we learn cooperation and forms of government. Wagon Train 1848 is the one we use in our lab. It looks just like Oregon Trail, other than what it says up there, but you can play it over a network. You can have a true democracy where everybody has to painstakingly vote on every single decision. Or you can have a republic. Just don't let the funny kid in the class become the leader of the wagon train, or he will put you at a grueling pace, and he will put you on bare bones. And I don't care if you have a doctor in your party, you guys are going to die of dysentery because of his decisions. At least you get to choose your own method for going across the river. Because, there's always that kid that fords a 20-foot deep river. But Wagon Train is such a good cooperative exercise, and if you haven't heard of it, it's because only schools got it, and it wasn't really a volume seller. Oregon Trail, of course, the regular version, standalone, you could go and buy for your home computer. And yes, you can play Wagon Train as a solo project as well. But this is one of those great programs. And yes, it was played over Apple Talk. You don't even need a server for it. You could even do trading in amongst yourselves, respond to requests, even give stuff away. And yes, you could do real-time live chat within here. Not bad for 1991. One of my favorites here, and one of our favorites in the lab, is Kid Pix. Pure exploratory learning. It's more than just a creativity tool. It's a form of expression. It's a form of expression that some kids who maybe can't put something into words are going to be able to get that idea out through just the pure zaniness and whimsy of this program. If there is ever a program that Roald Dahl would have designed, it's this. Seems like it's something right out of his book. It was actually Craig Hickman who wrote this, who to me is one of the all-time programming legends of the Mac. I put him right up there with Bill Atkinson. But even something like the wacky brush, it's like, okay, what happens if we do this? What if we change it a little? And it's not a question you as the educator even pose sometimes. The students find it out on their own. And if you do give them a little nudge and say, hey, play around with the option key, you never know what's going to happen. Even the kids who lack confidence in drawing can safely use the rubber stamps. Not to mention the program is bilingual, it's colorful, it's fun, it's something that even adults love to use. This to me is probably the MVP of all of our software right here. Every bit as fresh now in 2025 as it was in 1991 when the full color version was released. We use some other self-expression tools as well. We love Print Shop, which gives people the capability to use some graphics and edit those graphics. This version of Print Shop had the best graphic editor of any version that came out. A lot of people aren't as familiar with the Mac version. It's not the menu-driven Apple II version. It's not the Overkill Deluxe version. But this let people create everything from a simple greeting card to a big banner and everything in between. Kids love this. People actually have been known to write stories on this. I had one student once who made stories into Print Shop cards and found her voice as a writer. And seeing that is just pure magic. It's why we do this. It's why these machines are as great as they are. KidWorks is another one. I had a student who went from being borderline nonverbal to writing stories on KidWorks. And in part because we can actually pick icons to represent words, which those boxes on the bottom are the icon boxes. And yes, they separate by parts of speech. So we got a little grammar lesson in here too. This will read it back to you. Has a pretty decent sound generator, pretty decent voice for its day. And you can also, of course, add drawings to this, and you can even make your own icons, and then you can present it on what looks like an old tape player. Of course, we have a lot of good academic programs in here as well. I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention Number Munchers, which is always a crowd favorite, best way to teach number theory if you want to review those concepts. Sometimes we have to supplement with real instruction. I mean, I have a good anecdote on this. Back when I was in kindergarten, a friend of mine who was a couple years older than me introduced me to this game, and he said, oh, this game's really easy. Put it on primes and just eat all the twos. And on the next level, eat the twos and threes. Just don't eat the ones or you're going to lose a life. Now, I don't think he had any idea what a prime number was. I think he found this through trial and error. Now, the program will tell you it's not prime and give you an example of a multiplication problem, but you need to actually teach this stuff on top of it. This just becomes the reinforcement at this point, but it becomes the most fun reinforcement there is. Same is true of its cousin, Word Munchers, where now we can look at vowel sounds. In fact, a lot of schools would introduce Word Munchers before they would introduce Number Munchers, just because this was a lower level concept here of seeing, do we have a long E or a short E in this word? In these programs, I use on a weekly basis with students. I take computers around to them, and we do it. Math Blaster. Can't say enough good about this program. Rocket Launcher is drill, but you can also study the problems. Math Blaster is multiple choice drill, but hey, it's got a cool game on it too. So the kids actually want to practice it. Nobody likes flashcards, but everybody loves Math Blaster. Trash Zapper is one of my personal favorites. It'll give you a problem like 3 plus box equals 8. Now, obviously, that's basically X without making it an X. And you have kids as young as 5 years old who can pick up on the concept of algebra. Good anecdote about this. I had a 7th grader once, a 7th grader with special needs, whose teacher said, "You'll never be able to pick up algebra." That broke my heart to hear that. So I decided to bring out Math Blaster. And I told this student, how about you try Trash Zapper? Now, there's a blank in the middle. If you have 1 and you have 4, if you take 1, what do you add to it to get to 4? Think about what you would do. Count if you need to. So in about 10 minutes, this student was reliably doing those problems. And thanks to this great computer game, which gives you a couple tries on here and also gives you a nice reward with zapping the trash at the end, this student picked up on the very idea of algebra using little more than some encouragement and a Macintosh LC. This is why we do what we do. Sometimes we use a lesser-known program. How many of you have ever seen The Factory? Ah, yes, we got a few who have, yes. So this one takes order of operations and spatial awareness and puts them together. We look at rotations, we look at sequencing. This is such a valuable tool to use, whether it's seeing, do we know how to rotate a figure, or whether it's building that order of operations logic that we need. I've used this with students as young as 2nd grade. I reinforce order of operations with emergent high schoolers. It's good for everybody in between. And this is one that I feel more people should be using out here, but yet we haven't had a version of this out in about 30 years. Yet this is so valuable. And kids beg me to play this game too. They love it. They love the challenge of it. You can even design your own. And that's another great thing about these programs too. You can customize Munchers on the Mac. You can have different levels on each computer. So if you have somebody who maybe, is a little further behind than another one, maybe you want lower numbers or different word lists, you can put them on one computer, put another student on another, they'll never know. Math Blaster, you can write individual levels. If somebody doesn't know that 7 plus 9 is 16, and that's like the one problem they're struggling with, you can make it so that that problem comes out more than any other. You could even write your own levels to use that program to drill with negatives. And you can even have students work cooperatively on the factory to try to solve each other's challenges and maybe even explain why a figure can't be made. Just like those no solution problems we get. How many of you remember the Super Solvers? This is about as arcade as we get. We have a couple programs in the series. I don't have Spellbound pictured here, but I do have Outnumbered, which this one gives you data displays, it gives you word problems, all skills we still need to learn, plus some drill from Telly the Robot. And it's all done as you aid this little super solver detective guy on a mission to make sure that this hilarious mad scientist guy named Morty Maxwell, what a name, doesn't take over the TV station. So the storyline is super simple. There's no opening video on this version. There wasn't a later version. But it's there so that it exists, but the focus is on math. And yes, this game's also customizable. Midnight Rescue was basically the same thing, except now you're saving the school. And it does reading. It does vocabulary. It does deductive reasoning. And the best thing about the reading, it gives you a multiple choice question after any kind of prompt. It could be fiction, nonfiction, a letter, a short report on something. It could be an excerpt from famous literature. It basically is the workbook, but not the workbook. It gives you the multiple choice question, but it makes it fun. And it's at a level that anybody can pick up on the gameplay. Now, this is one I doubt anybody's seen in a long time. Spellosaurus. This is a very rare game. We have what may be the last copy of this in existence. And this is a spelling game that scrambles the words. It does recognizing words from letters, and of course you have to spell them correctly, all with your own word list, or you can use one that's pre-made if you so desire. This one is just so quirky and so out there. This is your early 90s dinosaur program. And it even says the word dude quite a bit. Throwback to those Ninja Turtle days. So yeah, it's period appropriate, and that way the students can see, oh, well, this is like that Gen X culture, that early millennial culture, whatever it is. Teachers are kind of that age now. We have teachers even younger than that, but we're picking up on it. Now, here's another one I bet nobody's heard of, Dinosaur Days, where you take dinosaur parts. You can either build a realistic T-Rex or Stegosaurus or Allosaurus or whatever you want to do. But you can have some fun, like add a Santa hat, and then you write a story about this. So writing an illustration based on a theme in a fun program. Can't get any better than that. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up. Carmen Sandiego, yes, we have the Fodor's book for people that need to look these up with the keywords. But this game also teaches the use of research. You could even have somebody with a modern tool next to them. They could use research to figure out where Carmen or one of her henchmen are going. But they can also go and look, oh, well, this is where we have to go next. And maybe we know that Chicago's the Windy City, for example, if they say something about it. And of course, we've got the side plot to get the warrant. So it helps with organization, executive functioning, the works. I just wish this had the rockapella music in it, but that would probably push it to too much disk space. This is another favorite we have in the lab. This was introduced to me in 4th grade by the gifted support teacher at our school. Hot dog stand. Basically, you run a business. It's math, it's commerce, it's economics, it's understanding how profit works, how revenue works, how cost works, all in a kid-friendly format where you were selling basically at a concession stand outside a junior football league. And you can also see why preseason games don't attract as many as the homecoming game. So, hot dog stand, one of those things that people still beg me to play. Yes, there was a newer version of this as well. But again, this is the monochrome version that I think might be one of the last copies left. Of course, we have fun too. Shuffle puck, you might be thinking, oh, look, he's teaching physics in this. Or maybe he's teaching health class because we know what happens when you play Lexan and he has a few too many sips of his champagne. But shuffle puck is one of those things we use to build fine motor and hand-eye coordination. Yes, we can do this with Kid Pix, but why not do it in a fun environment like shuffle puck? Besides, everybody needs a little break now and then from academics. And our other game that we play a ton is battle chess. Chess is such an academic pursuit, but such a fun pursuit as well, and it's a lifelong hobby. Why not teach it on a quirky chessboard where the pieces fight each other when somebody gets captured? Now, we all know who's going to win because we know who got captured. But it's just so much more fun to see the rook turn into this big brick bully and just shove the pawn into the ground. Or to see the knight fight and see some old Monty Python-style gags that get in there. If you've played the game, you know what I'm talking about. Best animation in this whole Mac version, though, by the way, is when the pawn captures the king. I won't spoil it for you. But this is another one where it's like we can even customize this by having a set-up board, and we can put chess puzzles up for kids to solve. A lot of people, myself included, learned chess on this program. And with the suggest move feature, anybody can pick up. This is all why we do what we do. You've seen a snapshot of some of our programs. I didn't even include them all. I have more programs in the pipeline. I'm hoping that someday we get some development going in here, maybe with HyperCard, maybe even with something else if somebody wants to do something. We're looking for a great grammar program, for example. But this is why we do what we do. These programs, you saw them. They're fun. They're inspiring. They make learning an experience, a memorable experience. How many of you went to school at this point remember computer class more vividly than some of the other classes you went to? I think a lot of people did. This is why we had computer camps where we used these programs. We tried out new ones. Yes, that happened where I went to school in my earliest days at Winchester Thurston, which is what we based our lab on. Now, I do want to say, too, building a lab is not easy. So I do want to say there are some caveats with this. For one, how do you design a lab? Well, you need an inspiration. And I mentioned my old computer lab. But the real inspiration for what I do was actually this building. Some of you may be like, wait, this is Disney World. The Hollywood Tower Hotel. Tower of Terror. Why? Because it's immersive. Because it's authentic. Everything in there makes you feel like you are truly in 1939. I rode this ride with my grandfather, who was 10 years old in 1939, and he could confirm the music, the sights, the sounds, the smells were all what you would have in 1939 in a posh hotel in California that fell victim to an unfortunate event on Halloween night. So I looked at this. I remember when I rode this for the first time, 1995, 8.5 years old, going on 9. And I remember just being drawn in. And I'm thinking, why don't we recreate this experience? Why don't we make it authentic? So we said, okay, let's set it in a year, 1992. Why? That was the peak of educational computing with the software. So therefore, no machines newer than 1992. Sorry to all you Mac Color Classic guys out there, they're too new for us. And then we looked at, okay, how about the software? Well, that was the peak anyway, that's fine. Anyway, oh yeah, let's get the hardware right. No teardrop mice. None of those Apple-designed keyboards. It's 1992 or earlier or bust. Just like what Disney did with Imagineering the Tower of Terror back in the 90s. Authenticity is kid-friendly here, because guess what? Kids know it. They appreciate it. How many of you remember Mr. Rogers? Mr. Rogers is quoted as saying, kids can spot a phony from a mile away. And you know what? He's absolutely right. Why have a phony Mac Lab? Got to make it 1992, or else it's just a carnival ride. We want something that's world-class and on the level of the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. We want to make it immersive. When you're on that ride, you're going through the line thinking, okay, what went wrong here? This place looked amazing. Why has it been basically a condemned building now for all these decades? And then you get sucked into the story. You want to know what happened to those 5 people on the elevator. You want to know what happens when you recreate it on the service elevator that's still in operation. And even with the gift shop, you buy bathrobes, you buy towels, you buy concierge bells, you buy things that you would find in a hotel. Even do not disturb door knockers. I've had the same one on every door of every bedroom I've had since 1995. Why? To always remember that first experience. A daily reminder to always make it authentic, always make it great. Now, of course, there's challenges with the lab. There's the old challenges, like kids who fight over the color-capable computer. It's like, no, I want the color one. It's the last one. No, I want the color one. Well, I go back to what my computer teacher did in kindergarten once. There were 2 girls fighting over the last Mac LC. You know what she did? Put them both on a Mac Plus. Problem solved. They both have to use black and white now. So those challenges still exist. There's always, of course, the occasional bus error with a little system bomb and everything. You know, it happens. But also, there's the age-old question, System 6 or System 7? Well, we stick with System 6 because it's faster, especially on a Plus or SE or Classic. It runs all the programs we need it to. And there's no wrong clicking in the wrong window, which just frustrates kids, especially ones who are so used to iPads with everything being full screen. Then there's new challenges. We're in the process right now of replacing all of our hard drives with Blue SCSI. We have the problem where we need to keep sourcing parts that just aren't there anymore. And we need to just tear things apart like we do classic cars. These things are getting as rare as a Sterling 827 with some parts. If you know, you know. So we want to make sure that we have all of this. And of course, we also want to keep building connections. As you can tell, this fits the modern curriculum. We can use this in 2025. Everything that we mentioned these programs can do, if you're checking off little boxes of maybe state or federal standards, you've probably checked them all. And you can see that these computers are as useful now as they were 3 decades ago. And guess what? 3 decades from now, if we can keep them running, they're still going to do something great. We've passed it on to future generations. There's nothing better than seeing somebody draw in Kid Pix for the first time, cross their first river on Oregon Trail, even get their first math blaster problem right. It's a cross-generational experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world. So I call it our pocket full of miracles. Everybody needs a theme song. The New York Yankees have New York, New York. So I picked another Sinatra tune for ours. It was an idea that came to me back in April when I saw some kids break out of their shell and not only learn some things, but be confident in it. Something I've been seeing over all the years I've used these. We started using these labs back in 2010 when they went in during my student teaching experience. It's one of these things where we see kids who become very, very, very confident that, hey, I can do this. I can solve these problems. I can read well. I can communicate. I can do all these things. And the sky's the limit. Without these computers as our intervention, if you will, who knows where these people would be? It's why we keep doing it. It's why we sing this song sometimes when we're loading and unloading. At least it goes through my head, at least. And it's one of these things that, again, we want to absolutely make sure these computers are doing the right thing for the kids. We always have to make sure they're working, they're functional, but more importantly, we want to make sure they're still inspiring. So I'm going to open this up for Q&A. Who's got some questions for me? Chip widths, you said?
Programming game. We have a little cartoon robot. You give commands to a visual programming language.
I don't have it, but I like the idea.
There's a new version that just came out.
Okay.
If you're sticking with the Mac, I'm kind of in contact with the people who make it. Maybe I can send them a copy.
Sure, that would be awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Anyone else? Yes. So some of them recognize it as a computer. Some of them are like, this is a computer. And they pick up pretty quickly, which is another thing I love about this, and something I probably should have mentioned there, is that they take to it almost right away. The biggest challenges are, one, not a lot of them are as used to the mouse as previous generations. They're better off with touch screens or trackpads. And two, when they click a menu bar, they think you can click it and everything's going to still be there. They don't realize you have to hold it down. But I would say 95% of the time they figure it out on their own, which is just amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good question. Do you want that to happen where it's at home for them, or do you want them to kind of explore and see if they can solve the puzzle? It's a 50-50 split. Oh, yeah, anything retro.
They find out how telephones used to work because there might be a Hitchcock film or somebody on the phone and somebody picks up the other line and was you have to explain to them that, oh, well, to the phone, stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the fun part about it. It's like classic car shows. Kids love those too. Mhm. Anyone else? Sure. You mean like if the old software doesn't run on it or something? Mm-hmm. And that's something we have to keep an eye on with all this. You know, as soon as it comes out, we got to make sure that we check all of this. I know we got our first Blue SCSI earlier this year. Thankfully, went off without a hitch. In fact, the biggest issue I had is I had to find a computer that had an SD card reader because my MacBook Pro doesn't, and neither does the MacBook I have from before that. So I had to go out and find something I could do that on. But yeah, there's always going to be, you know, that issue of compatibility. It's no different than if you put a Radius rocket in your computer way back when. So, you know, it's an age-old problem, modern context. Thanks for bringing that up, though. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
How much of it requires that authentic hardware experience? I'm thinking about, like it could be where someone's a teacher and couldn't, in a different area, couldn't have your services. Now it's something similar. The limiting factor is hardware.
Mm-hmm.
How much of it is dependent on that, or are there any opportunities to scale it where you wouldn't all of that?
Well, certainly there's emulation. I mean, we can even play a lot of these things online these days. You know, archive.org has a lot of these set up and everything. And I've seen teachers even now use Oregon Trail like that with students these days. But yes, it gives you that, but it kind of goes back to the whole Tower of Terror comparison, where anybody can put a drop tower ride in an amusement park. But having the authenticity just makes it even, to me, more meaningful, where the kid's going to remember it even better there. Plus, you just don't get those vibrant colors on the CRT monitors or the whir of the fans or the dot matrix printers where you trust the slow process in a world that's too fast. So yeah, it's a good alternative out there. Although, again, that's like going to your local amusement park, in my mind at least. But yeah, good question. Thanks for bringing that up. Yes.
Expands compatibility or expands functionality. Say you have compatibility. Do you foresee a temptation of expanding your scope of what you do to where you accidentally slide into orange juice software because you now have hardware that can allow you to do more things? So now you accidentally move your scope into an area you didn't want to, or is that even an issue?
So that would be something where I would probably never do that just because I would want to value the authenticity. It's kind of like why, for example, to go back to our Tower of Terror analogy again, we're not going to go and put an iMac on the front desk, for example. We're not going to slide 1939 into 1999, even though that's kind of retro now. But even if the temptation's there, I would never fall for it myself just because I would want to keep us in 92 forever. Reproduction parts, sure. We have certainly some new ribbons, for example, for the image writers that have been made by Mac Effects, if you guys are familiar with him. We use those a lot. Obviously, Blue SCSI because drives are just wearing out. But it still is going to look and feel. Same keyboards, mice, and software. Anyone else? Yes.
Computers are way before the network experience, something like this. So do you find that they're using just the act of using these virtual computers to somehow teach them skills and things that they're normally not getting out? Do you feel that adds to their education because now they're exposed to things that are more foundational where we come from?
I would say problem solving more than anything, because they have to go and figure out, how do I do this on a computer that's 30 years older than me? And also they might look at a situation like, okay, how do I, for example, do what I do on a modern computer with this? Or even using the mouse is something where they build a new fine motor skill. So certainly there's a lot of benefit to it and a lot of learning experience from it too, which is great. Yes. Oh, you have no idea how many people ask, how do I get to YouTube on here? And I'm like, you don't. And that's the beauty of it. And the same could be said for web browser or anything else. And it does help with a lot of focus issues. I just have to make sure nobody's got a cell phone in their back pocket now. That's every teacher. Did you have one over there?
like you kind of alluded to, when things break and how it's very difficult to find parts. So I'm kind of curious about your strategy.
So we all know eBay's a little overpriced these days because people know what they have. If you know, you know. But I used to shop there a little bit more often. Even now, if I see a really good deal, if I have it in the budget, I might go get it. If I see one locally on Facebook Marketplace that I don't have to ship, I'm probably going to go snag it. And even if it's just a parts machine, it's a good pickup. Sometimes we'll take a computer, maybe it doesn't fit us well. We'll go sell it, and we'll take that money and pour it back into picking up software or hardware for the lab. But certainly, yeah, if we see something, we almost have to get it. In fact, just yesterday, I bought a mouse knowing that I had a mouse that was wearing out with the rollers and everything. So it's all about situationality. I have so many saved searches on these things, and even looking at lesser known places like Mercari, you know, occasionally you get something there. All right, I know I got to wrap it up soon. Any other questions? I can probably take one more if anyone has one. All right, well, I want to thank everyone for coming out. Also, big thanks to the folks here at VCF for letting me do this. So I will see everybody over in the lab, hopefully.